The Great Gamble, a story of love betrayed, family shattered, loyalty tested, and a woman who rose from the ashes of deceit to rewrite her fate, reclaim her power, and win a game she was never meant to survive but did, not with luck, but with fire. They say love is a game of luck, but in truth, it's always been a gamble. Every heartbeat is a wager, every promise a bet placed on an uncertain future. I never considered myself a gambler, not by nature. I lived carefully, moved cautiously, and always weighed my risks. But love, if we can still call it that, changed everything. Or perhaps it merely revealed who I really was. When I married Xian Wu, I believed I had found something close to destiny. The kind of man who moved through the world with practiced detachment. He was the embodiment of poise and mystery. He wore silence like a tailored suit, and his rare smiles felt like stolen glimpses into a hidden world. Women admired him from afar, but he had chosen me, or so I thought. In a world where affection was a luxury few could afford, being chosen felt like a prize worth fighting for. He came from wealth, of course. Old money, generations deep, with an ancestral home in the hills of Gangnam and business routes extending from Seoul to Jeju. His family ran one of Korea's top-tier luxury hotel chains, famed for their opulence, discretion, and ruthless efficiency. To be brought into that world was like being plucked from obscurity and flung into a drama I wasn't written for. I was the outsider, the girl from a modest neighborhood, raised by a schoolteacher and a seamstress. We had no family crest, no legacy, no whispered family name echoing in upper-class circles. All I had were calloused fingers from too much piano practice and a stubborn will that had often been mistaken for pride. Sanwoo's mother, Madame Yoon, made her disapproval known from the first introduction. She studied me like an antique vase with a hairline crack. Appealing, perhaps, but destined to shatter. But Sanwoo had insisted, and I, blinded by the illusion of love and the validation of being chosen, ignored every warning sign carved into his silences. He wasn't cruel, never raised his voice, and never lashed out. But indifference, when worn daily, becomes a quiet violence. It's the kind that eats away at your soul without leaving bruises. In our home, a sprawling glass-walled penthouse overlooking the Han River, I became both wife and ornament. I learned quickly how to greet executives at black tie galas, how to align myself in family photographs, how to stay 3 steps behind in public and 5 ahead in private. I studied the rhythm of high society like a second language, absorbing the customs and burying my edges. But what I could never erase was Jia. She was the ghost that lingered at the edge of every scene. Childhood friend, trusted confidant, board member of the hotel group. Her presence was constantly polished, elegant, whisper-thin silk, and diamond-studded discretion. She was everything I was expected to be, and nothing I could ever become. People spoke of her with reverence, with a familiarity that always excluded me. Even when I sat at the head table, I felt like the seat belonged to her, and I had merely borrowed it. Their history was long. Too long. She knew his favorite scotch, his reading habits, and the way he liked his ties knotted. She was the keeper of his past and in many ways the gatekeeper to his present. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was his wife, not his memory, that the ring on my finger meant more than the ghost of their youthful intimacy. But true love can't be measured in rings or rituals. It lives in gestures, in moments, and those, I realized, were no longer mine. It began with a mistake, or rather with a discovery disguised as one, a misplaced keycard tucked inside a cufflink case. I wasn't snooping, I was looking for a receipt. But when I saw the initials J.Y. Lim embossed in subtle gold, something in my stomach curled in on itself. My hands trembled, just slightly, as I tucked it back where I found it. Denial is a strange drug. I told myself it could be business, a meeting, a reservation made on someone else's behalf. But denial erodes like waves against stone. I called the hotel from a burner phone, a boutique suite in Jeju, booked for 3 months, regularly extended, always under her name. I hung up before they could ask for a follow-up. My breath shook like brittle leaves in the wind. I didn't confront him, not yet. What's more dangerous than betrayal is uncertainty because it leaves room for hope, and I wasn't ready to extinguish mine just yet. Instead, I watched, closely, how he'd hesitate when his phone buzzed late at night, how he'd leave on business trips with just enough vagueness to sound polished, but never specific enough to be traceable. I began collecting fragments, transaction logs, credit card slips, and brief but telling exchanges with Jia over dinner tables when they thought I wasn't looking. The hurt was layered. The first was realizing the man I had built my world around was emotionally tethered to someone else. The second was deeper, that I had slowly erased myself to fit into a life where I was always meant to be a placeholder. I began building my own scaffolding. Quietly, carefully. I hired an attorney under my maiden name, a woman who came highly recommended in silent circles. Divorce settlements among the rich are battles waged in shadows, Her name was Jin. She understood discretion and vengeance in equal parts. Together we created a timeline. We built a map of infidelity wrapped in a chain of embezzlement that linked personal affairs with corporate misconduct. Gia's suit had been paid for through company funds, subtle enough to go unnoticed but traceable. We followed the money. We tracked it until it formed a noose. The weight of each discovery was a quiet agony. Nights blurred into one another, the ceiling above me echoing with silence and the steady tick of a life I no longer recognized. Some nights I'd sit by the window and imagine walking away, starting fresh, leaving the riches, the scandal, and the blood-soaked glamour behind. But then I'd remember, walking away meant letting them win. And I couldn't allow that. I needed the truth to mean something. And just when I thought I had reached the depths of betrayal, the ground gave out beneath me again. My sister, Yunseo, my closest blood, my brightest memory from a childhood of scarcity and struggle. We had once shared secrets under the covers and drawn dreams on the fogged windows of our one-bedroom flat. She had drifted from me since the wedding, growing distant as though my new world had swallowed hers. I thought it was resentment, perhaps envy, but it was something crueler. She had always admired Seon-woo, from the beginning. She used to tease me about how handsome he was, how aloof. I never imagined admiration would twist into desire, or that desire would bloom into betrayal. It was a business trip, supposedly. He was in Busan. She is on a work assignment in Daegu, but I saw them, together, in the marble-floored lobby of the Jeju Hotel. She was laughing, touching his arm in a way no sister-in-law ever should. He didn't pull away. The next day, I returned to Seoul with a wound so deep it left me numb. I didn't cry. Tears felt too soft for the jagged betrayal I now held in both hands. My husband and my sister, the two people I had trusted with the fragile parts of me, together, behind my back, in my bed, in my life. When I confronted Unseo, she wept, told me it had been a mistake, that it had only happened once, that he had made her feel special, seen, that I had always been the strong one, the one who had everything. And suddenly, her betrayal became my fault. Her affair, my responsibility. I saw red, not rage, but clarity. I saw them all for who they were. Seon-woo, the man who played hearts like poker chips. Ji-ah, the ever-present shadow dressed in silk. And my sister, the girl who once braided my hair, was now wrapped around the very man who had broken me. So I planned. I didn't scream, I didn't accuse, I waited. Because there's a power in silence when it's wielded with purpose. I scheduled a gala, a celebration. Our wedding anniversary is 5 years of union, love, and loyalty. That's what the invitation said. It was to be held at the flagship hotel, a black-tie affair filled with media, business partners, board members, and family. The perfect stage, the perfect trap. In the weeks leading up to it, I perfected my role. I smiled at Seon-woo when he kissed my cheek. I had lunch with Ji-ah, praised her elegance, and thanked her for overseeing the decor. I visited my sister and gave her a necklace I had once promised her in childhood. I made them feel safe. I let them believe I was still blind. But beneath the surface, everything was shifting. Every text, email, and photo had been backed up. Every expense report, every misstep, categorized and prepared. I knew I had to act before they did, because in games of betrayal, timing is everything. The night of the gala, I wore red, not crimson or wine, but scarlet, unapologetic, and searing. I stood beside Seon-woo as cameras flashed, offering my best smile. People whispered compliments, remarked on our elegance, our unity, and our love story. I almost laughed. I waited until the final toast. That was when everything changed. The sound of crystal glasses chiming together still echoed in my ears as I stepped away from the stage, the crowd falling into a low hum behind me. There's a silence that follows, exposing a stillness more piercing than any scream. I had expected chaos, but what I got was breathlessness. Frozen stares, gaping mouths. In that moment, the room had become a gallery of betrayal, and I, its unrepentant curator. On the screen behind me, the evidence I had compiled played out like scenes from a forbidden film. Images flickered of Ji-ah exiting the hotel suite in the early morning, Seon-woo's signature on the reimbursement requests for the personal bookings, and transaction records routing company funds to private villas. Voice memos captured in grainy audio echoed in cold, intimate snippets. Late-night meetings, murmurs of secrecy, whispers that laid bare a conspiracy of lust, greed, and entitlement. Then came the last slide, a photo of my sister, taken from a security camera in the Jeju Hotel, her arm wrapped around Seon-woo's as they entered the penthouse suite. The room gasped. The shame wasn't just personal anymore. It was corporate, public, scandal at its most surgical. They all stared at me not as a wronged wife, but as something altogether unfamiliar. For the first time, I was not a fixture. I was the flame. Seon-woo stood motionless, jaw tight, eyes dark with disbelief and fury. Gia had already disappeared into the shadows, slipping away through the side door before the final slide even finished. Cowards always run when the truth is no longer theirs to control. My sister didn't run. She cried. Loudly. Messily. It didn't matter anymore. The press seized it like wolves. The whispers in the media the next morning weren't about the affair that was typical fare. It was the execution. The precision. The way I had torn apart an empire with a single curated event. Headlines spun tales of betrayal, collapse, and a woman who had quietly pulled the thread that unraveled the entire Yoon dynasty. Madame Yoon, once the untouchable matriarch of the hotel chain, tried to contain the fallout, but the damage was irreversible. Her son's infidelity might have been survivable, but not the financial fraud, not the misuse of corporate funds tied to personal indulgence. Board members pulled out. Stock prices fell. Investors demanded inquiries. She summoned me to the estate. I didn't go. In the weeks that followed, I moved like a phantom through the wreckage. I filed for divorce, not with tears, but with bullet-pointed precision. The attorney's mind, now plural, proceeded like a well-oiled machine. Everything was laid bare. The hidden accounts, the offshore shell companies, and the falsified budgets connected to Gia's personal expenses. Every time they thought they could outmaneuver me, I reminded them they had spent 5 years teaching me how to play the game, and I had learned far too well. Seon-woo didn't speak to me during the proceedings, not a word. His silence was no longer the cold comfort I had once learned to survive within. It was now his last defense, the armor of a man who had lost the right to speak into my world. At one point he tried to offer a private settlement, a quiet payoff, a clean break, but I refused. This wasn't about money, it was about reckoning. The public face of the Yoon family cracked further when Gia's resignation hit the media. She released a sterile statement about stepping down for personal reasons, but the damage had already cemented itself in every whisper behind closed doors. Her family, once tightly tethered to the Yoons through years of business and favor, quietly distanced themselves. My sister tried to see me. She sent letters, long, clumsy letters written in looping cursive that sounded more like apologies to herself than to me. I didn't respond, not because I hated her, but because she had chosen herself over me. And in the world we were born into, sisters didn't survive betrayal like that. Ours would never be a wound that healed. It would always be silent, but deep. Eventually, she moved back to our hometown, disgraced. Her job is gone. Her name was attached to too many headlines and whispered about at too many family gatherings. I heard she had moved into our old apartment, the one above the laundromat with the broken heater. It was poetic, almost tragic. We had both left that place dreaming of more. But only one of us understood the cost. The final court ruling granted me half of everything, not just the money, the shares, the properties, the legacy. I walked away with a controlling interest in the very company that had once rejected me as unworthy. Seon-woo's signature on the transfer agreement was shaky. His pride fractured far more deeply than his bank account. I wondered, as I watched him sign, whether he remembered the moment he first asked me to be his wife. Whether he realized I had stopped being that woman long ago. But what stayed with me most in the aftermath wasn't the vengeance. It was the stillness that followed. When the dust settles after a storm, the house remains standing, but the people in it are not the same. I stood in the penthouse one last time alone. The red dress from the gala hung in the closet like a ghost. The city lights twinkled in the distance, unmoved by all I had survived. I didn't cry. There were no more tears to give. Instead, I left. Not just the house or the name or the luxury. I left the version of me that had begged for love, waited for validation, and adjusted herself to fit a mold she was never built for. I had clawed my way back to myself through betrayal, humiliation, and fire, and I was not going to stay in the ruins. I moved into a modest home tucked behind a grove of cherry blossoms just outside Seoul. It was small, quiet, warm. It reminded me of the life I used to dream of before ambition, before love turned sour. I filled the house with plants, I bought a new piano, I started writing again. Columns, essays, and stories that spilled from me like healing. And in the solitude, I rediscovered my breath. I began to rebuild not from nothing, but from everything I had reclaimed. The world saw me as a woman who had survived betrayal, but they misunderstood. I hadn't just survived. I had rewritten the rules. I had stared into the abyss and dared it to blink. There were moments of ache, still. Mornings when I woke expecting the weight of Seon-woo's presence beside me and felt only the echo of the past. Nights when I dreamt of my sister's laughter and woke to the silence between us. Healing is never linear. It comes in waves, but I no longer drowned in them. The world moved on as it always does. The Yoon family rebuilt, reshuffled leadership, and rebranded. They painted over their history with a fresh coat of PR and charity work. But the cracks remained. The old glory never returned. Not entirely, and perhaps that was the point. I never remarried. Not because I had given up on love, but because I had found a deeper one, a love for myself unbent by anyone else's expectations. I traveled. I learned to cook dishes I had once only pretended to enjoy at formal dinners. I laughed again, loudly, freely, without apology. Years passed, and the scandal faded from headlines, but its shadow lingered in certain circles. They called it bold, reckless, legendary. Women approached me at events, quietly thanking me. Some whispered that they wished they had done the same, that they had walked away when they had the chance. I smiled at them, not out of pride, but recognition. Because we all gamble in love. We all place our hearts on the table, hoping the person across from us won't fold when it matters most. But not all bets are fair, not all games are honest. And sometimes you don't win by playing safe. Sometimes you win by going all in and being willing to lose everything to find yourself. In the end, the great gamble wasn't about Seonwoo, Jia, or my sister. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about waking up from the lie I had built my life upon and daring to live outside it. I wasn't the woman they underestimated anymore. I was the woman who survived the gamble and won.